After confronting the Lovecraft mythos, the works of Maurice LeBlanc, and the most infamous real-world serial killer in history, Frogwares finally gave us their first original non-crossover Sherlock Holmes story since 2004's Case of the Silver Earring. The Testament of Sherlock Holmes sees the darker aspects of the detective's character ramped up.
Give me the address of a certain Kurtz, and the doctor will dress your wound. No address, no treatment.
He's pretty soon being accused of crimes himself, and shows no desire to try and clear his own name. In this game, just what is going on with Sherlock is as much a part of the mystery as the crimes you're investigating.
But allow me to express some reservations about how you are proceeding.
Holmes has a new voice actor this time, with Kerry Shale stepping into the role. He's had a promotion after having previously been seen as an American Pinkerton agent, joining forces with Jeremy Brett's Holmes in a 1994 episode of Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes.
When you're on the trail of a lifetime, Mr. Holmes, you put all thoughts of personal safety out of your mind.
The change in actor coincides with a change of overall tone. The earlier games managed to fit in quite a few silly moments, even when Holmes was facing Jack the Ripper, but many of the campier elements have gone entirely by this point.
I don't fancy ending up like Kurtz. Perhaps you're right, but we'll have a chance to make up for it.
Okay, maybe not entirely. Still, Sherlock's behaviour in this game is erratic. He's always had a darker side with his drug habit and sometimes lackadaisical attitude towards others, but Testament takes things to extremes, though there are reasons for that are eventually revealed towards the end of the plot. This lends the game a new, slightly darker form of humour from the character's behaviour and sarcasm.
Have you ever carried out a post-mortem, Holmes? It requires a great deal of precision.
Don't worry, I learn quickly. Hand me a bone saw.
The game doesn't shy away from the more gruesome aspects of the case this time around either. Where the victims in Jack the Ripper were real people, with this story being completely fictional, they're free to do whatever they like with it, and they're certainly not restrained. You'll be investigating some very grisly crime scenes in detail. In terms of gameplay, the Testament of Sherlock Holmes continues in the style of the previous games, but expands the options a bit further, making it the most polished game in the series up to this point. As well as the series' standard first-person camera and the traditional adventure game point-and-click setting, this game defaults to a new third-person over-the-shoulder perspective. The first two modes work in the same way as usual, but the third-person camera is the one to use if you want to avoid the tedium of pixel hunting, since it highlights any objects in the near vicinity and lets you cycle through to the one you want to interact with.
A mark undoubtedly made by a diamond.
For the other modes, there is a hotspot highlighter again, but it's not as good as the one in the previous games, only highlighting things in a limited range in the direction you're pointing, making the first-person view a little more awkward to play this time around. Throughout your investigations, you get to explore quite a few areas of London, from the obligatory scenes in Baker Street to a circus and fairground, via an opium den and various residential areas. To bring in the nostalgia, we even get to revisit Whitechapel from the previous game.
We're looking for two people, called Grave Abe and Kurtz. Do you know them?
As with the earlier games, you'll spend much of the time finding clues at crime scenes. You will find the usual seemingly insignificant clues that only Holmes can recognise the significance of, such as broken glass, or your everyday disembodied finger. Sherlock can see the significance in soot in front of a fireplace.
It is soot.
At least he does know how to pronounce soot, unlike some other adventure game characters.
The wall is covered in soot.
It continues and develops the features that appeared in Jack the Ripper, with deduction boards where you can piece together clues that you find, and it takes a bit more thought this time around and makes you feel like you're actually solving something.
These sooty prints were left by a tiny hand.
Ah, small sooty fingerprints. So we have the identity of the criminal mastermind. Aside from the investigation though, a lot of the gameplay relies on logic puzzles. and these still don't make a great deal of sense within the context of the story. Some of them work well, such as revealing secret messages, but there's still no reason why someone is locking something away by means of a chess puzzle as opposed to, say, a key or a combination. It's pretty much a genre trope, and these puzzles are actually mostly very good, so it just about gets away with it, but requires a slight suspension of disbelief. The puzzles in the game are quite varied, and it does go further and throw in even more variety at times. At one point you even get to control Toby, the dog borrowed by Sherlock Holmes in The Sign of the Four, though he seems to have become a basset hound in this game, and judging by the very out of place looking mat at Baker Street, it seems he at least sometimes lives with Holmes. It's one of the few small inconsistencies with the original stories, the biggest probably being this.
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. My word, it's my stories about your investigations.
Well, if they're your stories, why have they got Arthur Conan Doyle's name on the book? And for that matter, how is it a Penguin Complete Edition when Penguin books weren't even founded until 37 years after this game is set? Then again, when we were finding Beatles sheet music 2 games ago, I guess anything can happen. There are some other flaws, though they're mostly fairly minor. This puzzle I found a bit annoying because you have to discover details in the photos using a magnifying glass in order to locate the correct judge. But it makes no sense that the details you see through the glass are not actually in the picture otherwise. This man is clearly not holding a cigar in this picture until you hover the magnifier over it. And this pair of glasses isn't even there until you look through the glass.
What should we do next, Holmes?
The most annoying flaw in the game is with this version of Watson proving himself a complete idiot once more. He'd already aided the criminal in the earlier Nemesis, and here he manages to do it again in an even more foolish way. You go to visit a poisoner prisoner in jail.
So, who do we have here? The celebrated Sherlock Holmes himself.
Who is guarded by
O'Sullivan. At your service, Mr. Holmes.
Later, when there seems to be a fire breaking out in the cells, Watson calls for O'Sullivan.
O'Sullivan, can you hear me? O'Sullivan, answer me.
Yes, I'm here. Quick, get me out of here. The Flints have escaped, and they are fighting like dogs. Help!
Well, he says he's O'Sullivan, so he must be telling the truth, even though he's now speaking in the same Dr. Von Goosewing voice as a prisoner we were speaking to 5 minutes ago. Better help him out.
Wiener Welt und Wunderkind, what's this?
At least in another part of the game we get to see Watson at his most formidable, as he takes down an obnoxious medical colleague.
As for being responsible, as you call it, it begins with doing your job properly, particularly when one is a doctor and caring for the poorest people within our society.
Hopefully Watson's own medical competence is better than his investigative skills, though Holmes doesn't really seem to think so.
What a bunch of incompetents. Oh, if I was as unprofessional as that, there would be murderers running all over the town.
What's the matter? Are you a patient of Dr. Watson?
Very amusing.
These quibbles aside, The Testament of Sherlock Holmes is once again the best game in the Frogware series to this point. The writers were able to concentrate more on just coming up with a good story, rather than trying to fit in crossover elements, and it paid off. Though I'm not entirely convinced that Holmes' explanation to his behaviour completely explains all aspects of it. There's a framing story involving a group of children discovering Watson's book and looking back at the case, which all feels a bit unnecessary, but it doesn't detract too much from the story.
Sherlock Holmes isn't a nice man, is he?
For anyone wanting to try out a Frogwares game, then this is definitely a good place to start. After this, they would change things up again for Sherlock Holmes' Crimes and Punishments, where things would get even more unreal.